It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me. So what I'm going to say today is pretty much in line with what Father Joseph just introduced in terms of how to teach Christian theology in dialogue with Chinese religions. And I would like to introduce a course that I designed in collaboration with Father Michael Agliardo, which has the title Bridging Confucianism and Christianity. And to be a little more specific, Father Agliardo is the brain of the project. He gave me some ideas when he visited Loyola in the fall of 2019. And I was the henchman that wrote it out. So compared to Father Joseph's course, this course is more focused on Christianity in dialogue with Confucianism. And the reason we came to design this course is also rather similar to what Father Joseph has already mentioned, is that many Catholic universities, including the one I'm teaching at, Loyola Chicago, requires students to take 2 courses in theology to fulfill the requirement of a core curriculum. One of the 2 courses needs to be Introduction to Christian Theology. And Chinese students usually find this course to be very difficult because compared to students from America, or in some cases, Europe, South America, and Africa, they have not been exposed to Christianity in China. And in my conversation with them, many of them have mentioned that they had never heard about the Bible or Jesus, or if they knew, heard about the name, but actually knew very little about them before they started studying here in the US. And meanwhile, instructors also struggle to convey Christian theological ideas to these Chinese students whose cultural background they're not familiar with, and who sometimes still have language barriers. So over the years, my colleagues have often sent their Chinese students to my office to talk about how to get the hang of Christian theology. And I've thought about different ways to help them. And one of them being, I would develop a English-Chinese glossary of theological terms. But a more direct way of helping Chinese students, I thought, was to design a course that is not completely new and daunting to them. So I thought of designing this course, which is still about Christian theology, but teaching Christian theology in dialogue with Confucianism, which Chinese students already have some degree of familiarity with. So this course, Bridging Confucianism and Christianity, still falls under the category of Introduction to Christian Theology, but is taught from a comparative and cross-cultural angle. Furthermore, this course might also be of interest to students who are not from China, but have an interest in China and Chinese culture. At least at our university, we also have an increasing number of such students. This might create an opportunity for Chinese students to get to know students from different cultural backgrounds. So overall, the course aims to follow the preeminent Jesuit missionary Matteo Ricci, a pioneer who explored possibilities of dialogue between Christianity and Confucianism. And the course proceeds in 4 steps. The first unit introduces the foundations of Confucianism, including the thoughts of Confucius and his eminent disciples, Mencius and Xunzi, as well as later developments of Confucianism in new Confucian thinkers. And the second unit introduces the basic narrative, doctrines and practices of Christianity with a focus on Catholicism, including the covenantal narratives in the Bible, of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and some basic Christian doctrines, such as the Nicene Creed. And the third and fourth units are the focus of this course. The third unit looks at the historical encounter of Christianity and Confucianism, with a focus on the missionary of the Society of Jesus in the 16th and 17th century, which laid the foundation of Christian missionary work in the pre-modern period. This unit also explores the challenges faced by Chinese Catholic intellectuals and their visions of prominent Chinese Catholic intellectuals concerning how to be Catholics without abandoning the cultural heritage of Confucianism. And the dialogue of Confucian and Christian traditions were not always smooth, as we know. And we will look at an episode of conflict as well, namely the Chinese rights controversy, during which time there were heated debates about whether Chinese Catholics should be allowed to practice their longstanding rituals, especially making sacrifices in honor of Confucius and ancestors. And finally, the fourth unit recapitulates some critical themes in Confucian-Christian dialogue in today's global context. The fourth unit such as, for instance, like the Confucian concept of Tian and the Christian God, and the Confucian concept of Zhen, benevolence, and caritas in Christianity, and the Confucian conception of rituals and Christian liturgy. We will pay special attention to filial piety and discuss if it has a place in Christian ethics. As mentioned earlier, the primary purpose of this course is to help Chinese students in American Catholic universities learn about Christian theology from a comparative perspective. This course will hopefully mitigate the sense of foreignness of Christianity, which makes a course on Christianity daunting to Chinese students. It also aims to promote dialogues, as I already mentioned, between Chinese students and their peers who are non-Chinese and yet have to help them merge better into the context of American universities. And that'll be it.
Okay. Dr. Wang, I'd like to thank you very much for recapping the structure of that course, and also for sharing with us some of your experience and maybe the frustrations of Chinese students who come to a Western campus and all of a sudden have theology thrust upon them. As I said before, I'd like to open up now the floor to people who have questions that they'd like to raise for Dr. Wang.
Yeah, Professor Wang, that's a very interesting approach, especially as you have both groups in your classroom. So those who have already grown up in the Western culture, the American culture, and those who are joining in. So to which extent does your class help fostering interactions or also better mutual understanding between those two groups, so the newcomers and those who have already spent a couple of years in Chicago or at least somewhere in the United States?
Okay, so I think that's a great question. So basically, we're going to have two groups of students. One is, I mean, mostly like students from the West, you know, what we call the West in a broad term, and another group is mostly students from China. I do have a lot of Chinese students do choose to take this class with me because we do have a lot of teachers in here. So one thing is, you know, we're going to introduce two traditions. So to some extent, everyone can feel somewhat at home with at least half of the traditions that we will introduce. And instead of completely, you know, like getting on board of a brand new tradition to them. So in that sense, I think that's a good way for students to feel somewhat at home and also to learn something new from, you know, the other part of the classroom that are more familiar with the other side of the tradition.
If I may follow up on
Sure.
Father Wagner's question, I'm just wondering, do you have specific exercises that engage students from each perspective, or those who are more familiar with Christianity and those who are more familiar with Chinese traditions? It's like classroom exercises and so forth, or how does that proceed? How would you promote engagement?
I have some like writing assignments to encourage students to write about. So what do you think is the difference between the conception of love in, let's say, in a Catholic conception of love in Catholicism versus, you know, in comparison with the concept of benevolence in the Confucian tradition, etc. And also, I will also introduce. I will have at least one session, I think, on you know, like the other variables in the Chinese tradition. For instance, the universal love, as you mentioned earlier, of Mozi. To, you know, also in comparison with these the concept of love in the Confucian and the Christian tradition. So basically these take the form of I would say like essay questions. So like each writing assignment about 5 to 10 sentences, I will write about a question. So what do you think of this? And students write about that and turn it in. So that's one way. And another way I do it is I don't mind forcing students to come up with good questions. So we do have So right now, like with the online format, so every Friday I have a live a synchronous discussion session with students, and everybody is forced to come with a question or a comment. Because otherwise it could easily zone out. The student could easily, and if you think hard, you will come up with a question. And I've been proved right by the students. And yeah, so I also ask students to, so what's your input to this particular question from a fellow student?
Wonderful. Okay. Other questions?
Thank you, Professor Wang, for beautiful sharing and about your coursework. I have one question. Do you ask students to watch some movie? Like I ask my students to watch Two Popes, some movie about Eastern and Western tradition to then reflect based on the theological theme?
I do. It's usually documentaries. For instance, I have this documentary. It's actually on the Confucian education in South Korea and how it's carried out. So it has a very strong focus on the study of rituals and how the practice of rituals prepare the students to become good members of the society, so to speak. So that's also like tied with the writing assignments. After watching, I can't let them watch a documentary for free. So they watch something and then we discuss it, or they write something about it. So yeah, if you have good recommendations for documentaries in Christianity, I really welcome them.
Okay, good. Yeah. And also I invited some of the, here are some Jesuits from different countries. So I invite some Jesuits to come give a short lecture, like 15 to 20 minutes. So they have some different understanding about theological study in Africa, Latin America, and Europe. So I think for me, can be a new input for students from China to learn something in a bigger way.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, in their feedback, as part of their comments, some students have mentioned that like watching these documentaries have been very useful because you see how these religious traditions are practiced on the ground. It's better than just listen to lectures and taking notes. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
One question I had stems from something that you mentioned when you said that the students from China that you encountered had not heard much about the Bible or Christianity. Now, I have worked with a number of people from China over the years, and many of them said when they were coming through school that yes, they were taught something about other religions that they had, encountered, just as I had read about Hinduism and religions of other parts of the world, say Africa and Latin America. They had encountered something of that before they came to the United States. I had encountered something of that. So just as I had encountered, they found, at least this was true in the past. So I'm wondering, would we be finding or encountering among Chinese students an increased filtering of all religious ideas? In other words, you can think back of when you went to school in Shandong province. Were you exposed to some ideas of the West or of Christianity or of Jesus? And do you think that's less so today, that the government is not even teaching the Bible as literature or just as basic information, that they're just shutting all that out?
So this is a great question. I can't really say for students of today because of the age gap. I'm about 20 years older than the students that would come here today. But when I was growing up, I don't think we were taught anything about Christianity until a little bit in high school, in a class called politics, the 政治, which everyone is required to take. And there we were taught that, like religions, like including Christianity and Islam and all, are spiritual opium for people. It's actually just a tool for, like Western forces to come and occupy China. So there's military forces, there's, people want to do economic exchanges, and this is the spiritual occupation that was going on. So that was what I was taught. So as for students of today, it's unclear. I think, as you mentioned, like some people have heard something, I don't know exactly what they were taught, but I guess a lot of time it varies from person to person. Maybe I should modify what I said earlier. A lot of students have not seen the Bible. They have heard about the Bible, but they knew practically nothing about it.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Dr. Wang, I thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing about how you have adapted this course to the living circumstances of Loyola Chicago.